Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lindsay, a member of the CK12 team, and my colleague Felix and I will be running this Learning Management System breakout session on CK12 and Google Classroom. We're so glad you're taking time out of your day to join us. We are offering this session as part of the 2019 CK12 Certified Educator Program as an additional resource for those of you using Google Classroom. Given the short nature of this session and the focus on a platform outside of CK12, the session doesn't count toward your 5 live session requirements, and it does not have a matching assignment. We are still hosting it through Zoom, so we would like you to use the Q&A window to ask any questions of Felix or our team as he's demonstrating. And then the chat window is for you to network with other educators and have a community conversation. Just in the chat window, your big reminder is always to change it to say all panelists and attendees so everybody can see what you're posting in that window. If you have any issues with our broadcast, just let us know. There is a handout for this sheet. It is available at the tinyurl.com/CK12 Google 2019. We've listed that on the screen, and we'll also put the link for today's resource in the chat window right now. It's a reference page that you can use to follow along during this presentation. It can be printed, if you like, at a later date as a reference page. Just keep it on your desktop. Just know that it's there for you at that tiny URL and in our CEP book. Okay, we're going to jump right into the content, and as we go, feel free to post any questions that you have in the Q&A window. But today's session on Google Classroom integration is going to follow the following topics: Flexbooks 2.0 and related modalities. We're going to do a quick overview of CK12's Flexbook 2.0 platform and learning modalities that can be assigned to classes in Google Classroom. Google Classroom integration, how to assign content and practice and see student progress in Google. Our newest Flexbook 2.0 lessons include text. They often have embedded multimedia and questions, and corresponding practice or a customized quiz. Other assignable resources, which can be found in the related modalities for a 2.0 lesson or individually across our site, include videos, simulations, Plex interactives, and RWAs, real-world applications. We cover many of these in depth in other webinar sessions, but let's talk a bit about what you are assigning and what is reported back to you. So this chart is in several of our sessions, and it's on your resource page if you need to refer to it later, so don't feel like you have to memorize it or write it all down. But what we're trying to tell you is that a Flexbook 2.0 lesson automatically assigns any matching practice or quiz attached to that lesson when you make that assignment. The score reported to your class will be based on the attached practice or quiz. These are scored as a % out of a total goal of 10 correct for practice or the total number of questions for a quiz. If you make your own Flexbook and have yet to include matching practice, then the lesson would be assigned like any other learning modality, and that just receives full or no credit given. All right, so that's for Flexbooks 2.0. Individual practice quizzes report the same way as they do in a 2.0 lesson, while reads and other modalities like Flexbook 2.0 lessons without practice or quiz show full or no credit. Again, if you want to reference this chart later on, you can find it on the resource page for this session. And I think Felix is going to kind of work his way through explaining all of this to you as well. So why don't I go ahead and hand it over to Felix.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through this demo. But first, a word about sharing versus assigning to Google. So I'll kind of point out this as I'm doing the demo, but there's an option to share a resource with Google Classroom. The big difference between sharing something with Google Classroom and actually assigning it is that when you share something, it's basically just going to post a link to that resource, and there isn't any work to be done on that. So it's just like if you were to take a link from the browser and copy and paste it into Google Classroom, kind of like as an announcement or just a regular post. Whereas when you're assigning to Google Classroom, you're creating an actual assignment within Google Classroom And that is where work is expected to be done. So from those assignments, you'll actually get a score sent back to Google Classroom's gradebook. And so the other thing, kind of like your first time connecting to Google Classroom, you'll see a link that says connect to Google Classroom. And if you haven't already sort of went through the process of accepting the permissions, you'll also see a permissions dialog come up saying like we'd like to have permission to do a few things. So that will include accessing your classes, accessing the rosters for those classes, so being able to see who the students are, and then being able to create assignments on your behalf, and also to grade assignments on your behalf for the students. So you'll see that kind of like the first time you connect, and then after that you won't see that that prompt asking for permissions. And similarly, students, the first time they're accessing an assignment, they'll see a similar dialogue with sort of the same set of permissions. And so right now, let me share my screen with you all. Okay, so right now I'm signed in as a teacher, and I'm on CK12 website. So first, let me kind of go through a workflow where you're going through a subject. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick algebra, and I'll show you like a few of the things that you can assign before we get into the Flexbook 2.0 world, which you all have been exposed to through the CEP program. So right now I'm just going to click on real numbers just to bring up some different modalities. So right now you're going to see a bunch of things that are listed here. It's saying assigned because I actually have a CK12 class where this read is assigned. And down here I've done this as part of like a CK12 class, so it's saying I've completed it. So this is not specific to Google Classroom. This is functionality that we have for our own internal classes. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and click on this classify real numbers, and I'm going to show you how to assign it to Google Classroom. And also notice there's a practice here. Because these are not the new Flexbooks 2.0 sections, if I assign this read here, it's not going to automatically assign the practice. These are actually two separate things. So if you did want to assign this practice, you would have to assign it separately. So I'll do this read first, and then maybe I'll just do this practice here. So a couple things to point out. You can kind of change the title here. I'm going to leave this as is. Instructions is where you can post comments for students. So, you can also post links. So if I wanted to do something like this, I could do that as well. So if you're creating an assignment and you wanted to post like a separate article or something like that, or maybe a link to a different resource on CK12, you could do that here. And it doesn't have to be done at this moment. I'll kind of show you what you can do after you've created an assignment. So other thing I want to point out is, so you'll see CK12 and Google Classroom. When you're using Google Classroom, you do not need to create and should not create classes on CK12. Everything you're going to do is basically managed within Google Classroom, with the exception of sort of creating the assignments here to send to Google Classroom. But you don't have to create separate classes, and you don't need your students to sign up separately. I'll show you kind of what happens in a few moments. So I'm going to click on Google Classroom. Since I've already done the permissions thing, it's not going to ask me, but it's going to have me select an account, and then it's going to load my Google Classroom classes. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this class. You can select multiple if you want, and you can also give it a due date or just leave it without a due date. And I'm going to click assign to class. And once this is done, it's going to say it's done and it's been posted to my class in Google Classroom. So before I leave this page, I'll do the same thing for this practice here. So because this is in a badge form, it has this assign to practice dialog here. And I'm just going to note that this is a practice. And I'll click on Google Classroom because I'm using Google Classroom. And I'll go ahead and select the same class. And then right here, we have this show correct answers option. So by default, this is turned off. And when this is turned off, this means that students, they won't see the correct answers until after the due date has passed. So if they are doing practice assignments or if you're assigning quizzes and you leave this option sort of turned off, they won't see the answers to the questions that they've missed on this report screen. I'm going to turn this on just so you can see that, but that's what this option is saying. And again, I'm going to leave the due date blank. And so this is going to also go to my same class here. And so with that, let me go over to that class now. So now I'm in my Google Classroom class. It says my stream was updated, so it's going to bring in those 2 assignments that we just created. So here is where we had the instructions, the text where I said, please see this assignment. It has a link to that assignment here. It's been assigned to all the students in the class. And so after you assign it, you can go through and edit the assignment. Oh, and here's the other assignment that we just did. So here's the practice assignment. So one thing to point out, so after you've assigned to Google Classroom, you can edit. And what I'm going to do is click on edit. So within here, if you're not already familiar, by default, we assign to all students. But if you just wanted to target certain students, you can. You can do that just by unchecking either all students, just uncheck that and select the students you want, or if you wanted to do a couple, you can. So you have that option to do after it's been assigned. You can't do it while you're on CK12. And again, this is the instructions text that you can modify. Also, by default, the point value we give is 100. So if you wanted to change that to something else, you can set it to 10 points, assign a due date if it hasn't already been specified, or if you want to change it, you can. And then, of course, you can attach different resources. So that's kind of all the things you can do within Google Classroom. I'm going to go ahead and save this now, and I'll update it. Okay, and so I'm going to go back to CK12, and then I'll come back to this in a second. Let me bounce back to this modalities. So we have a few other resources. I'm going to click on the Plex here and show you kind of how to assign, that you can assign these and how to do that. For the most part, when you're going through a lot of the resources on CK12 that can be assigned, you'll see this assign to class. And if you click on it, you'll see pretty much the same dialogue. Select Google Classroom. Let me just say this is a Plex. So I'll go ahead and click on this, and I'm going to continue to use the same class. I'm going to assign that. So hopefully this part of it is pretty straightforward, and I'm just going to go to a couple different things. So as you're browsing, read, Plex video, practice, and the real-world example are all things that can be assigned. This activities and study aids can't be assigned. And if I were to click on this, you won't actually see an assign to class action here. But of course, for the practice, you can assign it. So with that, let me go back and let me just jump into my library. So you can assign things from within your own library. If you've been bookmarking or working on things, you can do that. So I'll just click on a quiz. Again, it has the option to assign, and just to show you, it's all the same dialogue, so I won't walk through that. You can also search for things. So from here, if you're not browsing, if you just want to jump in and do a search, you can. By default, we show CK12 content first, and then community contributed is things that other users have created and published. So it might be small modifications, it could be major, but these are things that other users have published. So you'll see that in the community contributed, and then anything that's matching your search that's in your library will show up here. So that's just another way that you can find content. And if I click on this, it's going to take me to a page kind of like what we saw. But so you can also search to find things, and you can assign it. Once you see that assign to class dialog, it's pretty much the same from there. So now I'm going to take you into sort of the new Flexbooks 2.0 that you guys have been working on throughout CEP. Should all look very familiar. So let me actually go into some of the content and show you how to assign. So right up here, you see this assign button. I'm going to click on this. Again, I'm going to select Google Classroom. And so this looks a little bit different, but for the most part, it's the same. So up here is where you could kind of change the title if you wanted to. The instruction text is here. The classes are listed, and also because this is assigning the associated practice, which is down here, it has that same option to either have the answers shown or just leave them kind of hidden until after the due date. So again, I'm going to go ahead and select this class. With these assignments, you have a start date and a due date. By default, the start date is today. I'm going to set this a day ahead, and I'm going to give it a due date of Friday. And I'm just going to click assign. And so, like Lindsay had mentioned previously, this is going to assign this entire section as well as this practice here. So unlike the read that we assigned earlier, where we did the read and then we did the practice separately, this is kind of all in one shot. So with that, let me go back to the class. And so one thing to note is, since this was scheduled later, it has a saved post. So it's going to come up tomorrow at 12. So now kind of let me switch gears and kind of show you what the student side of this looks like. All right, so let me switch over to this screen here. So this is my sort of demo student account. As you can see, it has the assignments that we've created. It doesn't have the one that was scheduled for tomorrow. It's not showing up because it's not scheduled to show up till tomorrow. So that's one thing to be considered. Let me go ahead and click on, let's see, we'll do the Plex. We'll start out with the Plex. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm not signed in to CK12 at the moment, just to refresh and show you that. So I'm not signed in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this link here. And so what's happening now is it's signing in my student account to CK12, and then it's redirecting me to the assignment that was assigned to me. So we have two types of interactives. One is this Plex you see here. Another one is our simulations. So for both of these, they do require some interaction in order to submit this assignment. So what I'm going to do is click on challenge me, and I'm just going to attempt one of these questions. Didn't get it wrong, or I didn't get it right, but that's okay. All this is requiring is that there's some interaction saying that the student has opened it and did something on the page, and then we automatically submit 100% because these aren't actually graded the same way the quizzes or practice are. So we say, okay, you've done this assignment, you get the credit for doing it. And if I go back to my my class stream, here you can see this is now graded versus assigned. And if I click on this, it says I got the full 100 points. So that's a Plex assignment. Let me go back here and show you some other assignments. So these are ones that I was previously doing in an earlier demo. I think this is the one. Let's see. Okay. So let me show you this. So what I did, this assignment was actually created from a Flexbook, not the 2.0, but our just our regular Flexbooks assignments. And this was a section that was assigned. And so as you see, this kind of just shows the content. It doesn't look the same as like a section that you'd see here, which I think is the same one. Yeah, so this is the section that was assigned. So if you guys have any Flexbooks that are not like the 2.0 style, this is kind of what it looks like to the students. And so this is like a stripped down version. It's just the content, no other side panels or anything is shown. And with these assignments, and also for videos and real world example assignments, as soon as they open this, they kind of get the credit right away. So once they open the assignment, they're getting the full point value for that assignment. There's really no interaction required. It's just, did they open it? Yes or no. If no, it'll just say it's still assigned. So after you kind of access the assignment, it just sends you the grade back to the grade book. And then I had one, let's see. Let me open up this guy. Okay, here we go. So this is the Flexbook 2.0 assignment. This one I had went through previously, but it says I can turn this in. Actually, real quick, let me go back to the teacher side and assign one that's not scheduled for tomorrow. There's one thing I wanted to point out. All right, so sorry for jumping around quick. We'll just do this one again, and I'll just not set the due date in the future, or the start date. Because there's one thing with these assignments, it does require you to do the practice before turning it in. So let me now switch back to my student. Okay, and go back here, streams updated. All right. So with the Flexbook 2.0 assignments, because it's also assigning the practice, it's requiring that you do the practice or the associated quiz before you're able to actually turn it in. So if I click on this, it's going to say you haven't completed the practice yet. So I actually have to start the practice and go through that before I can submit. And let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to click Start Practice, and I'm just going to randomly pick things, and then I'm going to submit. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop. This is going to take me to this screen, and even though if they were to go through this, it would, instead of saying stop, it would say submit. Like if you were to answer the 10 correct that you need, it would say you can submit this, and it would still bring you back to this page. But because, and this is actually a workflow that we're working on improving, thanks to your feedback. But right now, if I actually, so this is kind of basically what I'm saying. This is not turned in yet. What you have to do is click on this button to close the practice or the quiz that's associated. And now you're back at this turn in. Now you can click turn in, and then this will submit the assignment. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback on this workflow, kind of something that we were trying out, and we are working on improving that so there's not as many steps. But currently, at least in this iteration of it, you do have to close that practice before you can actually turn in the assignment. So and I think some of you may have even seen that while you've been sort of working on your own CEP assignments. So it looks like this is still going through. So I'm going to actually go ahead and switch back to the teacher side, so I can show you what the teacher sort of grade books within CK12 looks like. Or sorry, not CK12, but within Google Classroom. Okay. So if I click on this grades, so they do have a grades kind kind of their gradebook. And we have something similar that we're working on rolling out to Google Classroom. A gradebook that we have, it has a bit more information, especially for our assignments. There's like heat maps and things like that. You've probably seen it in another CEP session. But this is what the scores kind of look like once they're submitted. And if I can remember, let's see, I want to show a practice, one that's been turned in. Let's see if this is one. Okay, so this is one. So here's a practice that's been submitted previously by my demo account. This little attachment here is actually a link to the report. And so for the practice and the quizzes, we send this URL back along with the grade so that you can actually see the questions that were asked, you know, what they got right, what they got wrong. So that's available for you. What I did was I went, clicked on the assignment, and if you go to student work, you can see the attachment here. And the students also have access to this report. So that's something we include, and that's for practice and quizzes. So if your Flexbook 2.0 have a practice and quiz assigned, you'll also see that link to that report. And so I think with that, I will pause and start going through some of the questions that you guys have answered.
Sure. Thank you, Felix. Just a reminder, since this isn't a core webinar session, you guys are able to drop off at any time you feel like you got the information that you needed. But we do have a bunch of questions and Q&A here, so definitely hang on if you want to hear these answers. A couple of people were asking basically for you to go back over of, is there any reason why somebody would have a CK12 class and a Google Classroom going simultaneously? And then similarly, if they're just living in the Google Classroom world, do students need to create CK12 accounts?
Yes. So first question, is there a reason you would have CK12 classes and Google Classroom classes? My answer to that would probably be no. Yeah, I mean, most of the things that you could do in CK12, you can do through the integration that we have. So if you wanted to not create an assignment and just share something, you're able to do that through the share. There's a share workflow where you can just share something, or you can just take a link from the site and post it. But I think other than that, I would say no. It's probably more confusing to try to manage in both places. And by not using CK12 classes, if you're just using the integration, you don't have to worry about the classroom management. So they won't have to they won't have to sign up on CK12. Kind of when they're clicking on the link for the assignment, or when they're clicking on the assignment from CK12, it's going to sign them in and create the account if it's not already there. So with that piece, you don't have to worry about that. So I would probably steer away from trying to manage classes in both places. And if you're going to use Google Classroom, just stick to using Google Classroom. You're not really missing anything by doing it directly on CK12, other than the class reports, which we're working on exposing to you anyway. So I would say stick with Google Classroom if you're using Google Classroom. Otherwise, yeah, it'd probably be more confusing than helpful.
Okay, I'll let you kind of scan the Q&A a bit, but I'll take one of these questions. Somebody was asking which records a grade immediately upon opening and which requires student work to do, which I'm guessing you're talking about those charts, where if you are assigning a Flexbook 2.0 lesson with that practice or quiz, or you're assigning just a standalone practice or quiz through Google Classroom, you're going to get a percentage of how they did on that practice or quiz. So the other things that Felix was showing you are like our Plex and our simulations. On the Plex and the simulations, we can't tell you how the students did on those questions at this time. So what's kicking over to Google Classroom is once they're in that interactive environment and they start to answer questions or start to interact with it, it's going to show that they've completed that assignment. Similarly, our reads, videos, and real-world applications, we can't tell you how long a student watched the video. So once they access that resource, the grade is going to pass back to Google Classroom. It's just a completion. So for you as a teacher, this is kind of a workflow thing. I work with a lot of teachers who do things differently. If it's not important to you to know that the student interacted with the Plex and you don't want a grade being passed back for that, that's where you could always steal that URL. Remember, all of our resources have a unique URL, and you could just post that in your Google Classroom as like a warm-up activity and say, hey, everybody go to this Plex. And maybe they're just accessing it and you don't need a grade pass back. So really the assignments are for things where you want feedback on, did the student open it? Did they interact with it? Or did they complete the practice or quiz? So it depends on, again, the information that you need for you. I'll kick it back over to Felix to field a couple other ones.
Okay, so some really good questions. So someone was asking can you schedule assignments from CK12 or only directly post? So right now, I guess technically the only place you could kind of schedule it would be from the Flexbook 2.0 workflow, where you can actually say what the start date is. And we were kind of playing around with exposing that to the other modalities that you can assign. So that may be something that we add later, and then that would kind of give you the ability to schedule it. But currently, that's only from the Flexbooks 2.0, where it has that start field. So hopefully that answers your question. And then again, of course, after you create the assignment, you can go in and modify the assignment and change that time. And then so kind of on a similar, someone had a similar question. If you assign a Flexbook 2.0 in the future and it is a draft in the classroom, can you edit the assignment for that classroom and assign it immediately, or do you have to delete it and reassign through CK12 to start today? So what I'm going to do, this saved post is showing here. This is the one that I scheduled for tomorrow. I'm going to click on that to open it up in the editor. And then right up top where it says scheduled for tomorrow, I'm pretty sure I could change that. Okay. No, I cannot. Okay. So it says it has to be scheduled. Oh, I think it's just the time. Okay, so I probably could if I had the time. Let me see if I'm able to do this. All right, let's go. I haven't actually done this before. Okay, so you can. So that's good to know. So yes, you can edit if you had set the due date for the future and you want to change it to a later time. You can do that. So that is something that you can do in Google Classroom. And then, okay, so I think I got that one. And someone was asking about the time. I wasn't quite sure on this one, but it's saying regarding the time questions. Sorry, it just went.
Oh, it just went away.
Okay.
It said, oh, shoot.
But I think they're asking where can you see that. So I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, and feel free to post in Q&A. Okay. Yeah, so you're looking for time spent. So I can open up, let me see if I can find that practice that was submitted. So right now, I think might be it. No, yes. Oh, actually I have it here. So right now for our practice and quiz assignments that we actually post the report, if you were to open up that link, and actually let me just show you where that's at. So this is attached as kind of like a link attachment with this student's submission. So I'm going to click on this guy. Okay. And so, okay, so this is that time spent here. So this is the report that's attached to those submissions. And this would be visible for a practice or a quiz. And same for the Flexbooks 2.0 assignments that have a practice or a quiz. You'll get this information. The thing that we were working on adding for our class reports, which looks similar to Google's grades. Hopefully you guys have seen it. We're working on adding kind of adding that. So instead of getting this link, you would get a link to a class report that would give you sort of like a bird's eye view of all the students in the class and then all of your CK12 assignments. So that's something that we're working on getting out to you. But for the time being, for your practice and quiz assignments, you can find this information attached to your student submissions. And that gives you time spent, and then it gives you, what questions were asked, things like, and their responses, of course. So that's as an attachment on, just to show you one more time. Okay, what was this guy? So under student work for the assignment, if they've submitted it, we'll attach it here, and then it'll just show up as a link. You can click on that, and it should take you right to that report. And I think that's it for me, unless there's okay, I got one more. Let me see what happened. Okay. All right, so this one is asking if you allow permissions and post an assignment which ties student Google account to CK12, and then later students want to access other content links on CK12, can they just log in to Google and will everything be tied together? So that's actually a really good question. So the answer is yes, as long as they're using the same account. So whatever Google Classroom account they're using, if they were to come directly to CK12 and then click sign in with Google, that would definitely be the same account that they're logged, it would be tied to the same account. So it wouldn't create separate accounts. So hopefully that answers your question. And another question came in. Is there approval we would need to go through with our districts, as CK12 would have access to all of our students' email and so forth? Are there any privacy issues or conflict with student data being shared? So I think with that, because we are considered a third party from within Google, I think I would probably have the permissions prompt that we're sending maybe sort of checked through the district. And then I think anything that Google is already kind of giving you in terms of privacy would be the same. We have gone through sort of getting some privacy things sort of signed off. But I think the best thing maybe would be to contact us if you have any sort of questions or concerns around that. We will definitely try to work with you if there's any privacy issues that might be concerned. And I know we worked with districts in the past to try to work with their specific privacy requirements. So definitely feel free to contact us to get more information on that. I don't actually have like the best answer other than to contact us. And we'll definitely try to work with you guys to make sure you're able to use our platform.
Okay, well, we're waiting to see if there's any last questions that come in. I do just want to remind you that we have a handout that might help you with Google Classroom CK12, Google Classroom 2019. It's in your CEP book. We also are accepting feedback on all of our sessions. So if you have a chance, press the feedback form button in your book or use the tinyurl.com CK12 feedback 2019. And jumpstart at CK12.org is the place to email us if you have any follow-up questions. And then we're on all the socials. So let's do one last check-in with Q&A. Looks like it is empty. So we're going to go ahead and say goodbye, and we will see you all next time. Thanks for joining us.